Later this morning, House Speaker Mike Johnson will face his first steps in avoiding a government shutdown as the House is set to vote on his two-tiered continuing resolution plan. House Speaker Mike Johnson joins us this morning. Mr. Speaker, it's great to have you on. Finally on Squawk Box. Welcome. Good to see you.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I don't think it's the same. As a president gets 100 days that we got to decide how it's going. I think we need to cut that down for a speaker, don't we? Just with the way things have been working. How long do you think you got before we judge you? Are you already beyond that period?
I think I may be judged this morning. We'll find out. I've been on the job less than 3 weeks, but it's been like drinking from Niagara Falls. But, look, we're in good shape. What the House Republicans are committed to is changing the way Washington works. We have to. We're in this economic moment right now that has become a real crisis. I mean, you all talk about it all the time. You're educating your viewers to let them know that $33.6 trillion in federal debt is not sustainable. The Moody's downgrading of our credit rating is a very serious issue. And the reason that all these things are happening is because Washington is obsessed with deficit spending. These are the pains of Bidenomics, and we have to change it, and we're putting a flag in the ground to do that.
There's plenty of blame to go around, obviously. Bidenomics hasn't helped, but you're well aware of the deficits that we ran in the Trump administration as well. I know, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you what one thing that this would keep us open, but I mean, aren't we going to have to come back to these very difficult, intractable issues 2 more times in January and February? If we do it this way, aren't we just sort of delaying some of the hard decisions that need to be made, some of the tough negotiations that are going to need to be made?
Well, listen, we're rolling our sleeves up, and we're looking forward to those tough decisions and those hard negotiations. If we don't do the two-step, the ladder CR, as we're calling it, it's a real innovation. It's a paradigm shift for how Washington works. But what that will do is allow us to actually have those fights, have those debates, to do it out in the open so the American people can see it. If we don't do that, what is going to happen, and what would have happened here again, is another dreaded Christmas omnibus spending bill. This has been the habit here for decades now, for a long time, as long as I've been in Congress and before, where the Senate jams the House right before the Christmas holiday with a giant bill that's thousands of pages long that very few people have read, and spends, last year $1.7 trillion, adding $100 billion in new spending, just sprinkling that on top. That is no way to run a railroad. And so this innovation, this laddered CR that we're doing, prevents that from happening. And I think we'll have bipartisan agreement that that is a better way to do it, to have the actual appropriations process. I began that immediately after I got the gavel, but here we are on the eve of November 17th. We have a shutdown looming, and we've got to prevent that, because that would do even more harm for the economy.
Can you just historically explain how we got away from proposing a budget and living within our means the way it used to be done? How many, you said since you've been there, how many times have we done the omnibus before Christmas, and how did we get there?
Well, it's all I've ever known. I've been in Congress 7 years, but it happened way before that. The process, the appropriations process in Washington has been broken for decades. We're trying to fix it. I've been on the job for less than 3 weeks, and this is a necessary first step to do it. But the way that we got away from that, there's a law, there's a statute, a whole list of statutes that are cobbled together in the Budget Control Act of 1974. That's almost as old as I am. And Congress made the law, set forth the dates. The president is supposed to present a budget in early February. Congress begins its process. It's very methodical. June and July are supposed to be the appropriations kind of season. You finish it all up by the end of June in that time frame, and then there's plenty of time to do it before the end of the fiscal year. That hasn't happened. Well, I think lawmakers get lazy. I think that they like to punt these decisions as long as possible, and that is no way to do it, because governing by continuing resolutions is not a healthy thing for an economy. It's required us and has resulted in spending a lot more money than should be spent because there's not proper oversight. If we do the ladder CR, and I think we'll pass this, it will allow us to consider spending in smaller batches. That's good financial stewardship. That's what the process requires. That's what the American people should demand, instead of doing it all in one big giant bill. And I think that makes sense to the American people, and I think they're going to support us in that.
You must be at least hearing from the other side about some support. We heard from Leader Schumer about it. I don't know whether Leader Jeffries has weighed in yet, but how many do you expect to lose out of in your caucus? Will it be? for lack of a better term, I still call those 8 guys the crazy 8 because the former speaker labeled it Gates and the crazy 8. Maybe that's not fair, but will you get any of those guys? How many Democrats do you expect to be on your side here? And you know, that was like the cardinal sin or the mortal sin that Speaker McCarthy, I guess, was guilty of, and he lost his job because of it. You're allowed to deal with Democrats at this point, Mr. Speaker? It's your honeymoon. Does it feel like a honeymoon?
No, not much of a honeymoon in this job. The crises are too great. But here's the thing. What we're doing now is a little bit different than what Kevin was presented with. He was in a jam as well. But by breaking this up and doing the CR the way that we are, it's a new shift. Yesterday, you had on my colleague Andy Harris, who's a Freedom Caucus member. Dr. Harris, this was originally his idea, and we credit him with that and others who worked on it. But I think it's a real innovation, and so it's different. This is a different thing than we've done before. I hate CRs as much as everyone does. It is not the way you're supposed to do it. And we're going to get right back to the regular budgeting process and that statutory outline that I just recounted for you. We're going to start that next year. We're not going to do this again. We're not doing this under my leadership. And I think we have a moment to change how it's done. With regard to the whip count, I'm not sure yet. This morning, in about an hour or so, I'll go in with all the House Republicans. Hakeem Jeffries will go meet with all the Democrats, and we'll figure out the final numbers. I'm working on the guys in the 8 that are all my dear friends and everybody across the conference. Yep. I want all Republicans to vote on this because this is the first step in making real change in the chaos here.
You haven't made any enemies yet. That's what everyone says. You don't have any history with anyone. No one's mad at you yet at this point. That might not last long. That's why I was asking about the 100 days. Let me ask you this. We had a gentleman on earlier, Jake Sherman, said 2 more shutdown possibilities on the table if you do it this way, January and February. You got President Biden with some of the lowest numbers of his presidency. So here we're going to, suddenly Republicans are going to be blamed for trying to shut down the government again in January and February, and maybe once again snatching defeat from the jaws of victory by giving cover to the Biden administration for all the bad things that are happening in the economy.
No, look, I think that is way too cynical of an outlook. Everybody is operating in good faith. We just ran out of time. We need more time to finish the appropriations process. What we've done is we set 2 deadlines, to your point, January 19th and February 2nd. January 19th is the first batch of bills. There'll be 4 there. We'll address the other 8 before the next deadline. But everybody's working in that regard. There are a lot of measures in place that will create incentives for that. We have a structure in place that beginning January 1, there begins to be a 1% cut that sets in on some of these government spending in the various areas. If we don't get all the appropriations bill done by the end of the April timeframe, then those cuts would set in. So I think there's an incentive for both sides to get the job done and do it differently. And this is, again, a big innovation in how Washington works. It's the first step. We also then can train our attention on getting conservative wins on the supplemental spending request of the White House, to call that out, to get real policy changes on the southern border, which we desperately need, to get proper oversight of additional Ukraine funding, if that materializes, get Israel funded. All those things we can look at separately and appropriately evaluate, debate, and bring our principles to bear on. We can't do that, again, if everything gets handled in one giant omnibus right before Christmas. So well, I guess this was a really important step.
I'd be remiss. I mentioned President Biden. It looks like the candidate in 2024. When you were named Speaker, a lot of people said, "Oh, Trump ally, big Trump guy, big Trump ally." But you, as far as I know, you have not endorsed the former president yet for 2024, and this is. Everybody's watching this show right now. If you're going to do that, this would be a great time to do it, Mr. Speaker. You ready?
I have done it. Yeah, I have. I have endorsed him wholeheartedly. Look, I was one of the closest allies that President Trump had in Congress. He had a phenomenal first term. Those first 2 years, as you all know, we brought about the greatest economic numbers in the history of the world, not just the country, because his policies worked. And I'm all in for President Trump. I think I expect he'll be our nominee. Yeah. And he's going to win it, and we have to make Biden a one-term president. We have to do that.
Speaker, I have so many questions, but coming off of the back of that, just speak to it, because I think that there's a lot of Americans who look at the former president as fundamentally divisive to the country. They look at January 6th and the like, and they think to themselves, even if you like the policies that came about, what it ultimately did to the country, questions about democracy. There was a story over the weekend in the New York Times talking about how he planned to approach immigration. I know there's a lot of folks who want to be harder on immigration, no question, but some real questions about how he thinks about that. Some of the things that have come out in the last couple of days about January 6th and his intent to stay in that position, irrespective of what the actual public and citizens were voting for, and how you think about all those things.
Listen, I think when we're voting for president, it can't be about personalities. It's got to be about policies and principles. And if you want liberty, opportunity, and security for more people in the country, you contrast the two policies and the principles of Trump and Biden. It's not even close. Under President Trump, we had a thriving economy. We didn't have all these skirmishes around the world. We had relative peace because he projected peace through strength. We have exactly the opposite of all those things in President Biden. So I think you set aside those things and you look at what's best for your family. You look at what is best for your security, your safety, the economy, your pocketbook, all of these things. We have to make radical changes because the American people are hurting. Hardworking families are struggling. We can't handle inflation. We can't handle these things. And these are the results of the policies of the Biden
Mr.
White
Speaker,
House. And I think that's clear to most people.
I read the same piece Andrew's referring to. If he truly believed at that point of his presidency that it had been stolen and that there was too much fraud, then I could see why someone would say, I'm not leaving, I'm staying here. But is that what you assume? Because if he did know that he lost the election and was trying to stay, then that's a dangerous precedent to return someone to office that wasn't going to leave office, even if he knew for a fact that he had lost. So I guess you would argue that he really believed at that point, and maybe he still believes that he won the election.
Well, he says it every which way.
I take him at his word. I do believe that he believes that. Remember, I was one of his lawyers. I worked on the impeachment defense team twice in the House to defend his positions, and I know how he thinks, and he's convinced that because of all the irregularities and everything else that he was still entitled to that. I haven't read the piece that you guys are referring to because I've been a little busy the last couple of days.
Speaker, you just said something
but I will tell you,
which is you said you take him at his word. Would you agree with the idea that I think there's a lot of Americans that look at certain things that he has said during his presidency, before his presidency, now, that are fundamentally not accurate? And I say that politely, meaning that, I mean, there have been things that he has said where right now, by the way, it's sunny outside, but it's like he's saying it's raining. And I think for a lot of Americans, they look at that and they say, that's very hard to trust.
Well, listen, there are a lot of people in Washington who say things that are not accurate all the time. Everybody does. We're all human. But I'll say this about President Trump with regard to the election and what he believes about that. That is deep in his heart. I mean, I've talked to him personally about it. Many of us have. And over the years, you've heard him say repeatedly over and over the same refrain that he just felt like he was cheated in that election. And I think that's a core conviction of his. And when I say we should take him at his word on that, he believes it. Now, I don't know what comment you're talking about in this article, but I know that he has been absolutely consistent from day one. And he does believe in the rule of law. I mean, look at what he did on the U.S. Supreme Court, for example. He gave us great justices that are restoring the integrity of that institution, in my view. We had, of course, many judges throughout the system that he appointed, and that's the longest-lasting legacy of any president.
Speaker, you're talking about the rule of law.
So he has a good record on that.
You're talking about the rule of law, and he's now been indicted, on 40 different charges. There's such a juxtaposition behind the idea of rule of law and then things that he's done that may very well have broken the law. And I recognize that there's elements of it that may be political. I'm not even going to dismiss that, but I'll stipulate with you that there are elements that are probably true that are political, but not all of them.
Listen, I think this is motivated by political prosecutions, and we call it lawfare. That's what it is. It's just another way to go after a candidate. And what's happened to President Trump is unprecedented. And every time a new indictment drops, it follows after some favorable thing that he gets in the poll or in the election or whatever. I mean, everybody can see this with their own two eyes, and I think the American people can evaluate that for what it is. You have these district attorneys, and you have, the FBI and the DOJ that have been weaponized against against their political enemies. I came off of the House Judiciary Committee. I served there. I've been in the hearings. I've questioned Attorney General Garland and Christopher Wray at the FBI. There's a lot of abuses that have been allowed, and we have to reform that. It's one of the things that Congress has to be involved in because we have oversight responsibility. So we're using the power of the purse here. We're using our oversight responsibility. We're going to use every tool in our arsenal to make sure that we change the way Washington works and bring back people's faith in this institution, because it's critically important to keep a constitutional republic.
Can you change the way Washington works, Mr. Speaker, if the political polarization within the Republican Party continues? Because that could very well be the result of another Trump presidency. I mean, a lot of the challenges that you and the party face in terms of avoiding the shutdown has to do with the fissures within the Republican Party. A Donald Trump presidency, I would think, would all but guarantee that that remains, as opposed to electing a more moderate Republican.
Well, look, I'm an optimist. I look forward to the days ahead. I think our best days are ahead as a party. I think we have energy in the grassroots right now. I think President Trump polling numbers is one indication about that, or what people think about the future. And when he arrives and returns to the Oval Office, and I'm Speaker of the House, we will work together hand in hand on this. I think the thing that unites the party is our core principles. I keep talking about that. I talked about it the night before I took my oath of office. It's individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, human dignity. These are the things that have guided our nation since its founding. And right now, the Republican Party is the steward of those principles. The other team is doing the opposite. The Democrats are doing the opposite, and they're undermining those principles. So I think that's what rallies us. I'm excited to get on the campaign trail and go to every swing district in America with my colleagues and talk about those things, because I think that's what makes America great.
Speaker, I just wanted to ask you a separate question. You've talked quite openly, publicly, about the importance of faith and faith in your life. I think it was the first day that you had been sworn in. It appeared that you were praying on the floor of Congress with a number of other congressmen. And there is a question about the separation of church and state. We often talk on this show about folks, about whether religion should play a role inside a company, whether people should be allowed to pray inside a company. It's one thing to pray outside and to have your faith, and there's a great importance in that. But how do you think about that, and how do you think about the public perception of that?
Listen, faith, our deep religious heritage and tradition, is a big part of what it means to be an American. When the founders set this system up, they wanted a vibrant expression of faith in the public square because they believed that a general moral consensus and virtue was necessary to maintain this grand experiment in self-governance that we created, a government of, by, and for the people. We don't have a king in charge. We don't have a middleman. So we've got to keep morality amongst us so that we have accountability. And so they wanted faith to be a big part of that. The separation of church and state is a misnomer. People misunderstand it. Of course, it comes from a phrase that was in a letter that Jefferson wrote. It's not in the Constitution. And what he was explaining is they did not want the government to encroach upon the church, not that they didn't want principles of faith to have influence on our public life. It was exactly the opposite. Washington said, of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. And John Adams came next, and he said, our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. They knew that it would be important to maintain our system. And that's why I think we need more of that. Not an establishment of any national religion, but we need everybody's vibrant expression of faith, because it's such an important part of who we are as a nation.
Well, Speaker Johnson, we'll be watching, and I don't know whether we should, I guess I should, it's okay. Good luck. I don't want the government to shut down, I guess. So good luck today, and good luck in your 100 days, going to seem like 1,000 days probably when it's all said and done. Thanks for all your time and fielding all the questions. And
we appreciate it very much.
Yeah, we do appreciate it. And we're the least of your problems, probably, with when you got your caucus and then you got the other side to deal with. But thanks for all your time this morning. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate it very much.
Okay.
Great to be with you.
Well, Squawk Box will be right back.